All right. Let's see. All right, let's start this thing up again. All right. So I will go ahead and go back to sharing the slides again because we're not quite done with those. Okay. So I won't answer this question just now. What we'll do is we'll wait till we do examples in a few minutes, and you can see them for yourself. But one thing I really like is seeing you guys discuss that back and forth, because it's showing that you're thinking. You're like, well, you know, I mean, I guess. Like one of you said, if I hit the 5 character on the keyboard, but I have the caps lock on, it still just shows a 5. Right? So maybe it just returns the number just like it already was. And others of you are, thinking, well, but if it's not a letter, how can I lowercase it or uppercase it? So it should give me an error if it's not one of those, right? So I like the way that you guys are thinking through the details. You're thinking through, what is this? What am I trying to do with it? And so therefore, what seems the most reasonable thing to do with that? Okay, so we'll look at what the answer is in just a few minutes. All right, but first, let's move on to the string class. Okay, so the string class is, like I said, it's a class in Java. It's a class, so therefore any string is what we would call a string object. Okay, so we will get deeper into that. We'll touch briefly on that towards the end of this semester, but really you'll get heavy into that next semester in 102. Okay, but string, just what you need to know is that it is not what we call a primitive type in Java. Okay, it is a class. It is so all string used in programs are objects. Okay. Now there are some simple methods that we can use for strings that are very useful. One is the length method. Now all of these are what we would call non-static methods. Okay, so static methods were like the absolute value, all the character methods that we looked at just now. These are all static methods, which means you don't have to have an object of that type in order to use it. Here with the strings, all of these are going to be non-static. So they need an object. They need a particular string. So let me use an example. No, there's some here. There's an example here that I'll look at. Okay. So instance methods versus static methods. Again, we'll get into that later in next semester, later towards the end of this semester, and specifically more into next semester. So we have a variable, a string, method, and then possibly any arguments. So for example, if we had a string called message and we wanted to say what the length of it is, the length of welcome to Java is, and then we would use the variable message dot length with no parameters, no arguments, and it would tell us the length of that method, the length of that message, of that string that's in here. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, remember space counts, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So this would say the length of welcome to Java is 15. Okay. So here, now the char-at or car-at or char-at or however you want to pronounce this, but what you're asking for is what's the character at a specific index is going to tell me the character at that index. Now, this is another thing that sometimes messes people up. Strings, and later when we get into them, arrays in Java are what's called zero indexed. What that means is the first position in that thing, whether it be a string or an array, but that first position is index 0. The second position is index 1. Third is index 2, and so forth, all the way up to the last thing, the last character in this case is at index, whatever the length of that thing is, -1. Okay. So if I wanted to get the character at index 7, right, that would give me the 8th character in the string. Okay. So that can be sometimes confusing because we think in order to get the first character, I should get char at 1. But no, char at 1 is going to give me the second character in the string. Okay, so make sure you just put that to memory. Just the first character is index 0, second character is index 1, and so forth. Okay, because that becomes very important because sometimes we want to try to get the last character in the string, and so what we do is we would do like message dot char at 15 because we know it's a 15 character string, and that's going to give us problems, as we'll see. Okay. All right. Remember, the toLowerCase method in this case is what's called an instance method, not a static method. And so therefore we use a string. We call the toLowerCase method. It returns a new string that's all lowercase letters. Same thing with toUpperCase. Trim gives us a new string with all the white space on the end removed. Okay. White space is anything, I think we may have talked about this before, is anything that if I were to print something using a printer, wouldn't use any ink. So a space is a white space character. It counts as a number of characters in the string. It has an ASCII code, but it just doesn't take up any space. It doesn't use any ink if we were to print it. Okay, and it would be removed when we use the trim method. Okay. All right. Now there's multiple ways that we can concatenate strings. This one here with the plus sign is the one that we probably use most often because it's easy, it's simple, it doesn't require a method over here. Okay. But sometimes what we get confused on, sometimes what can mess us up is if we do something like, I showed you guys the example, if we did something like, or let's say I say 1 plus 1 equals, and then I did. Okay. All right. Now, if I were to do this, using like a system.out.print line, right? What would happen if I did this? What would display is, this is what would display, 1 plus plus plus. Plus 1 equals, and then it would give me 1, 1. Okay, which would be not correct math, right? So the reason why it would do this is because remember, order of operations, right? So it would see this plus, and it would see them as being the same operation. So if it does addition, it's going to do addition 2 times. If it does string concatenation, it's going to do string concatenation 2 times, right? So what's going to happen is it's going to see but it's going to encounter this one first, right? So what's going to happen? It's going to do string concatenation. So it will create this as my string when it sees this. Then it will see this plus sign, and it will do string concatenation again, and it will end up like this. Okay? So sometimes we can take this format, the concat method, instead to force string concatenation and make sure that pluses are always seen as addition. All right. But generally, most often, to do string concatenation, we just simply use the plus sign. We do it this way. Okay. Hope this good one. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So one thing also that you guys have been using frequently here is this scanner class to get input from the user. Now, we've used next int, next double, stuff like that. All right, but what if we just use just the next? Well, the next is going to take the next string separated by until it encounters a white space character of some kind. Okay, so here, if I enter 3 words separated by spaces, all right, so if I were to enter something like this is Java, all right, this is what I was to enter, then it would take this and put it into string 1, is and put it into string 2, Java and put it into string 3. The spaces here would get, in a sense, lost. They wouldn't be saved to any of my strings because that would be the character that it read until and then ate and discarded that character. All right. We could also do something like this, where if we wanted to get a character for some reason, all right, input next line would take the entire, not just till it reads a white space character, but until it reads a new line character. So until the user hits enter. So it would read everything they enter, even if they enter more than one character. Right? It would take everything up until then. Then it would take all the characters they entered up until they hit enter, put it into the string S. Then I would take that string S and say, what is the first character? What is the character at index 0? Right? And then it would take that character and put it into this char variable. And then I could display, this is what you entered. So even if they entered, say, they entered hello, this would display the character entered is H. It would just display the H. Okay. Thought process. What if they didn't enter any characters? What if they just, you say input next line, enter a character, and they just hit the enter key immediately? They just hit the enter key immediately. Huh. What would that character be? Good question. Okay. Question for thought. Right. Again, when we compare strings equals, right, if the string is equal to string S1, so we can pass it another string, the reason why this has to be done this way, why we can't use, okay, so let's say I had string S1 equals let me do it all lowercase because how this works out. Okay. The reason why I can't do something like this, S1 equals S2. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. The reason why this won't work is because, again, and we'll get into this way more in depth in CSE 102, but S1 and S2, even though they have the same value, they are not the same string. Okay, so even though S1 and S2 have the same value, they are not the same string. They're not the same object. This double equals, it doesn't just say, do these two things have the same value? It says, are they the same thing? Okay. So what that means is that, let's say one of you is 19 years old and the other is 19 years old, and I say, are you the same? Well, you would say, I'm the same age as this other person, but you're not the same person as that other person. That sounds confusing. Just because two different objects, in this case strings, have the same value does not mean they are equal. Okay, that's why this equals method is put here. This is why we have this in the string class. so that we can say what we want to say instead of this double equal sign. We want to say, does S1 equals S2? Now this will give me true because it's not just that they're the same thing, it's testing, do they have the same value? Okay. Same thing with the equals ignore case, compare to ignore case, and so forth. Okay. We can get some substrings. So let's say we wanted to have a substring that begins at a certain index and goes to the end of the string. So in this case, message.substring starting at the 12th character, index 11. Right, so this would give me this substring. I could also have a substring that starts at a certain index and ends at the index before this one. So think of it as it starts at this index, and if this was 0, if the first index is 0, then this is going to represent how many characters I'm going to get. So notice I start at 0 and I get 11 characters. Okay, so I start at a certain index, I end at the character before this index. Okay. Make sure we realize that the end index that we're stopping at is not a character that we actually get as part of the substring. We can find saying, what's the index of whatever character? It will search through the string until it finds it. It will return the index of the first occurrence that it finds. It will return -1 if it doesn't find it at all. Okay. Same thing, index of string, where we can look for a substring inside of. If we wanted to find the last index of something, of a character or a string, we can use last index of. Okay. We can add this second parameter from index if we want to start from a certain point in the string. So let's say we wanted to find the second character of a certain type. We would search up until we found it the first time, then we would search from that point on to find the second one. Okay. All right. So here, if we wanted to find a character or a substring in a string, so we could find the first space, and we'd say the person's first name is everything before the space. The last name is everything after the space. Now, this can be a problem because what if somebody has a double first name, you know, like an Ali John or Ur John or Mehmet John. There's lots of Johns as second names out there. You know, and so what would happen if they found that space and they said, oh, his last name is John something? All right, well, no, that's not quite right. So we might want to use last index of in that case, but then that has other problems as well. So, but you guys get the idea here, I think, that we can search for that space and say everything before that space is something, everything after that space is something else. Okay. We can convert between strings and numbers, all right, using this parse int, this integer class parse int method, where it will take something inside of a string, and if it can take this and make this into a number, it will. If it cannot, it generates an exception. It generates a runtime error. Okay. So one thing we often do as a test, or exam or quiz or lab, is what if we have a string and we want to convert it into a number, or whether it be an integer or a double, but we want to make sure that it can be before we try, because we don't like runtime errors. Runtime errors are not fun in computer programs. So we want to make sure that it is a number before we do that. Okay, so think about how you might do that, because that could easily be a quiz or an exam question in your near future. All right. So Here's an example of guessing birthday. We can look at that. That one's out there in the example slot, in the example lecture examples folder. Okay. Also, this converting a hexadecimal digit to a decimal value. Okay. One final thing we want to talk about as far as strings are concerned is how to format output, because sometimes we want to be able to display an output in an understandable format. So, like for example, you have a decimal number like, you might have a decimal number like 23.04567, something like this, 5045056, something like that. And you know that this represents like what is it? A money type. Like it's the total for something you bought at Negros or something like that, right? So this might be a tele or dollars or something like that. Well, normally you wouldn't see it displayed like this, would you? Right? Normally what you would see is you would see this, right, and maybe round it up because of this 5 here, but you would see just this part, right? So we need to display this. So we need to display this value, but in this format, with just 2 places after the decimal point. Okay? We can use the printf statement, the printf format. For those of you who have done C programming before, you're used to the printf command, the printf function. For those of you who have not, this is something new for you. But this is the way we can do this, because if we were to just do like this, it would display this whole number. Even if this were stored in a variable and we just displayed the variable, it would display the whole number, right? And that's not really what we want. So we can use something like this where, all right, we can use these different specifier outputs and be able to say what type of thing it is. So what happens here in this case is we can put this as part of a big string as the first thing, as the first parameter to the printf method, where this is what's called a conversion specifier. That's a special name for it. And when we encounter this %d, it says, okay, the first variable, the first value after my string is over, after this over, okay? What I want to do with that is I want to put whatever the value is in count, and I want to put it into here as, what's a %d? A decimal integer. Now that can be a little bit confusing, okay? It's an integer value, okay? It's an integer value, but it's a base 10 integer value. And the reason why that's important is because not all numbers are base 10, right? Some of them are binary, base 2. Some of them are hexadecimal, base 16, right? But what this is saying is this is an integer value that's base 10, and I want you to display it as such. So I want you to display a 5 there. And amount is %f, okay? %f, I want you to take this next value and I want to display it as if it were a floating point number, right? A decimal number with decimal points and all that stuff. Now notice it displays it with a default number of that places after the decimal point, 6 spaces to be exact. Okay. What if I wanted to do something else? What if I wanted to do 2 decimal places? That was my example right here. I don't want to show this. I want to show 2 decimal places. Well, if we do 0.2 here, that's telling me I want to display only 2 decimal places, no matter what. Whether there's 2 decimal places in it, as in the example here, whether there's 2, 4, 6, 7 decimal places, as in my example up here, I want to always display 2 decimal places. Okay, so I will go ahead and show an example of that. Let's see. Let me check and see if there's any questions, because I noticed a few of you guys are commenting some stuff. Okay, so there are a few questions here. Let me see. Okay, so some of you are commenting on back to 1 + 1 = 2, or 1 + 1 = 11. Yes, string reference type. Yep, good. Try catch blocks. That was back. What question was that related to? That was back to, oh, the parse thing. Yes, try catch blocks can be used for that. That is beyond, that's 102 material. Okay, so that's not for this. Okay, all right. Let me switch over to Java. Right, count for. Oh, for in here, I'm assuming is what you mean. Right, so what happens is when it sees this %, kind of like an escape character, right? It's kind of like that backslash we talked about earlier. And what it does is it says, okay, I'm going to, when I see this, I'm going to look into, after the string is over, I'm going to look into what my other parameters are, okay? And I'm going to look for whatever this is, in the first position. I am going to convert that into an integer, a base 10 integer, and I'm going to display it as such. So then I'm going to continue on. Oh, here I have another one. I'm going to look for a second one. Where's my second one? Here it is. I'm going to take the value there, and I'm going to display it as a floating point number. Okay. We'll see some examples here in just a moment of what happens if there are fewer items here than the number of specifiers. What happens if there are more items in here than the number of specifiers? Okay, so let's take a look at some of that. All right. Oh, I guess I need to share. My Java screen. All right. Here we are. Okay, so let's first, I'm going to do a new one because I do want to do some of the stuff that we talked about. What's today's date? 5th of November. Okay, so you guys should all have access to this because it should be sharing this with you guys. So we're gonna go ahead and do this. So let's first look at a couple of the questions that we brought up in class. Okay, so what I want to do first is what was the one we talked about? Oh, the character thing, right? Character lowercase, right? 2 lowercase. So we first do this. And if I did a capital S, okay, and I run this, what do I get? I get a lowercase s. Good. Let me do a capital, because I've just realized S, uppercase and lowercase look very similar. So let's do a capital B and a lowercase d. Okay, so we get a lowercase d as we expect. If I change this to a lowercase d and run it. Again, looks like we got a lowercase d as we expected. Good. Okay, so now here comes the big question. What happens if I put in a 4, a number? Compile, do I compile it? Good, it compiles. Okay, so no compiler error. Does it run? No runtime error. It does display the 4. So those of you who either knew or guessed or thought through it that it would just display the same character, You are correct. It does not give an error. And this is really important, by the way, for how things work, because oftentimes in programming, what we want to do is we want to compare two strings together, and we want to be able to have certain strings that are not the same be the same. So for example, if your email address was like mine, right, Joseph Leday at optinnews.edu.tr, okay, the system should be able to log me in if I type it this way or if I type it right. Either one of these should be treated as correct, as the same, right? As far as logging in, as far as username and stuff like that. Now, password, totally different, right? Passwords are case sensitive, right? But as for usernames, we want this and this to be seen as the same thing. And sometimes what's really helpful is to be able to have this two lowercase string method. In this case, it's the character, but expand that to the string where we're two lowercasing everything, right? Where we want to say, does this equals this? And what we'll do sometimes, what some of these systems will do, is they will take the string, they will convert it to all lowercase, and then compare it to the string that's actually saved in the system, okay? And if these are the same when one is converted to all lowercase, then we're good. So then the question is, well, what about something like this, the @ symbol? What's the lowercase for an @ symbol? What's the lowercase for a period? Or if the user has, numbers in there. Oh, no, not too far. Numbers in there, right? We still want them to be able to be seen as the same. Okay. Let me hurry up and finish this because my computer is not plugged in, and I just got a notification that the battery is low. So what we'll do is we'll do the format demo and then call it a day. All right. So this is some examples. Actually, I'm going to have you guys look at the format demo on your own, because this uses up a lot of that 10 point, like the show 4 decimal places and stuff like that. I'll put the one that I want to show you that I was talking about. Okay. Print F, right? Yeah. System.out that print F, where we said the total is percent, if we did %F, and let's say I had a double total equals that number that I said earlier, 23.04. Right there. %F. Okay. So if I compile and run this, okay. So notice that my total gets displayed with 6 positions no matter what, right? So it takes this and it rounds that 0 up, so it's going to be 6 positions. But what if I really wanted was just 2 places after the decimal point? Right? So now I can do that, right? I can see that. And really what I want is that's dollars, right? That was the total for dollars. So I can put a $sign there and run it. Right. Okay. So then the question would be, okay, well, what if I wanted to say, I wanted to display it twice, like maybe I want to display it once and the total is just that total and only 2 decimal places, which is a really long string. So let's just say and 2 let's say I said and total 2 decimal places and did %.2 f. Okay. Now, if I compile this, if I try to compile this, I'm going to get no errors. There's nothing wrong with this syntax-wise. When I go to run it, what's going to happen? Oh, I got an exception, right? And the reason why was because, see, I'm missing a format argument. So what happened was as it was running, it said, okay, take this %f and put this value in there. And then it said, okay, %f, look for a second value. Oh, there's no second value. There's no second value. What am I supposed to do? It won't assume that this should go in there. It won't do that. Okay, that's a little too advanced artificial intelligence for this thing, okay? So what's going to happen is it's just going to say, I need a second argument. I need a second value after this one. So when it doesn't find it, it's going to give me an error. Now what I could do is I could do this. So I put it in there twice. All right, so there you go. All right. Now what happens if there's 2 arguments, but only 1 specifier? Total is %f, put that in there. What happens to the second one? Let's see what happens. No problem. And the reason why here is as it was executing, as it was running, %f found a value, and then we ran out of specifiers. We didn't have any more specifiers. We didn't have any more need of anything. So this was just extra. Okay. Right. So I'll even change it and show it and use a different value here to show you that it won't give me an error again. Okay. See, no error. This gets put into here. This, it just gets extra. It's just thrown away. Right. It had no need to be there in the first place. Okay. But no error. All right. So if I have too many specifiers, if I have more than one here, but there's only one thing here, it gives me a runtime error because it couldn't find a second value to put in that second specifier. Here, it doesn't give me a runtime error because there was no second specifier, so it didn't ask for a second value. It was just extra information. Okay. All right, so since, like I said, my computer is about to die, unfortunately, or maybe for you, you might be thinking fortunately, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and end there for today. We'll immediately plug your computer in. So if anybody has any questions or anything, you can message this chat. Again, here in about 20 minutes, in about 12:30, there will be opened up a second quiz for those of you, for anybody that found at 10:20 you were unable to submit the first quiz. Take that quiz and I will make a decision about what to do with you. For anybody who's excused from this lecture, which hopefully you're watching this after you've already taken the quiz, you need to take that quiz. Make sure you submit no later than 1:20. That's the deadline for that. To submit it before 1:20. Submit it at 1:10 at the very latest, okay? Just to make sure there are no problems. All right. Also, anything, anybody who wants to take the second quiz, it's not the same as the first quiz. So anybody who wants to take the second quiz for practice, just to learn a little bit more, I'll grade it. But if you're not excused from the class, from the lecture, you will be expected. I will grade only your first quiz. Okay. I hope that's clear. I'm trying to hurry this up so that this doesn't die on me. And other than that, have a good weekend and have a good lab next week, and I will see you next Thursday.